Okie dokie. How's this afternoon? How's this day been? Enjoyed it? Would you come back next year? No? Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having us all and supporting this, what we feel is this great event. My name's Peter Hanssens, I guess one of the main organisers of the conference. In my day job, I do a bunch of data engineering myself as a consultant, so definitely not new to the field or anything like that. And I've got 4 awesome panelists. I think we all know Joe Reis, recovering data scientist, best-selling author, you name it. We've got Ash Smith from South 32, building data platform teams there. Zainab Maleki, she's an AWS hero. She's also a principal data consultant at Mechanical Rock. And then we've got Jonathan Neo, he's a data engineer at Canva. He's also the founder of Data Engineering Camp. So welcome everyone.
Thank you.
First of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. Can you kick it off, Joe?
Hi, I'm Joe. I'm really jet-lagged right now. So if I end up not being very coherent, it's okay. I also don't know what questions were going to be asked. So this will be a lot of fun. I like to live on the edge. But yeah, it's good to see you all. What do I do? I've been in data for 25 years. What else? Wrote books. Write books. That's all I do now.
Yeah.
So
seems reasonable.
Yeah.
How about yourself, Ash?
I have been at South 32 for 2 years, for 2 days ago now. Is it on? Can everyone hear me okay? Yep, perfect. Yep, been at South 32 for 2 years now, but started out in data engineering at Curtin University probably 15 or plus years ago because they gave me a job that was very manual, so automated on the OG of SSIS, and
nice.
I've kind of been wrestling with data ever since, but yeah.
Any folks played around with SSIS still today? A few folks in the crowd? Yeah, nice.
They aren't going to admit it. Just kidding.
And how about yourself, Zainab?
So I'm Zainab, technical lead kind of in Mechanical Rock. I started as a software engineer, so I've done a lot of work about bringing software engineering skills and DevOps practices into data engineering. And then recently I'm kind of like more focused into more actual data engineering and data modeling and things like that. So still learning a lot.
Yeah, awesome. And lastly, Jonathan. I think a few people recognize Jonathan from the community here in Perth.
Yeah, I guess I started data science actually and sort of never found my way out. Just like no work for data scientists in the market and kind of landed in data engineering. But yeah, I've been around a couple of consultancies as you might have seen. And most recently landed at Canva, been there for about a year now. And also recently founded a bootcamp focusing on data engineering education.
Awesome. So Joe, you're actually in the process of writing another book. You wrote the book on the fundamentals of data engineering, and now you're writing a book on data modeling, right?
Yeah.
Have you gotten to the point of sort of synthesizing what is data modeling?
Yeah, I think, well, there's a lot of definitions of data modeling. I'd be very, data modeling, sorry. Data. It's hard for me to say this. People will not understand what I'm saying the whole time. So it's something that facilitates believable and useful information for humans and machines. So this is the updated version of the definition that I have now.
Yeah, nice. I love it when you say Melbourne. I always love hearing.
Is that what I say?
Yeah. It's all good. So and what sort of got you to that updated definition? What did you feel was wrong with the existing definition?
Well, there isn't really an existing definition, right? So then there's like, I think if I were to ask people what data modeling is, there'd be as many answers for data modeling as the people that I ask. But I feel like it's one of these terms that very currently is very, I think, misunderstood because people will say, oh, data modeling is Kimball or one big table, or something is hogwash. So, because we're talking about physical implementations of data, what we're missing is the broader context of definitional meanings, business rules, information flows, right? And understanding the broader business and how that relates to data. And to me, that's what data modeling ultimately is. You translate those concepts, the conceptual data model, down ultimately to the physical implementation, but not the other way around. But we somehow focus on physical these days, so.
Yeah, certainly. Well, there's a lot of opinions on what data and modeling is, and so we'll throw it to the panel as well. Jonathan, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I guess there are lots of different ways you could like define data modeling, and like I think ultimately data modeling is what you use it for. So like you could model data for transactional purposes, and that's kind of the normal form, is as many of us may have learned in university. And then there's other kinds of modeling as well, like to kind of perform analytics, and that might be dimensional, Kimball, that sort of thing. Or it could be consolidation, maybe of lots of systems across a business. You want to bring it all in one single place, and that's kind of more of the data vault style of modeling. But ultimately, modeling is what business outcomes you're trying to achieve, and there are different techniques to get you there.
Zainab, Ash, would you like to add?
No, I think it's all been said by Jonathan and Joy. Yeah, it's like shaping your data in a way that you want to answer questions with your data.
Why do we data model? Like, I think you recently wrote an interesting blog post around, I guess, shaping data for the purposes of the consumer, and I guess the challenges and difficulty with scaling that. Why do we data model? Why do we model data, sorry?
I mean, ultimately, it's to provide believable and useful information, right, or knowledge. And so, I mean, I think it's the essence of it. Is it believable? So notice I didn't say correct, right? There's a big difference. So, who here deals with information or data that's directionally correct?
I worked in banking. I heard that term a lot.
Yeah.
It's painful.
You don't have to raise your hand, but very seldom is data actually accurate or correct, right? But it's believable, and more important, it's valuable, right? So that's why we model. I will add, though, the lack of a data model is also a data model. It's just a very crappy data model. So.
Yeah, Ash, would you like to add?
I feel like I could cheat really easy now and just read what's on the screen down there.
What's on the screen down there?
I feel like
you're
I'm
gonna
ruining the next
steal.
slide.
Yeah, you're gonna steal the other guy's thunder.
Yeah,
It's fine.
it'll make more sense when the next slide is happening. But I also feel sometimes, well, you need to model out a necessity. If anyone here has ever experienced working with, the lovely system of SAP, it does make no sense to anyone, and you have to model it so everyone has a shared understanding of what does this mean. And without that, you just create silos of tribal knowledge everywhere.
I guess we used to data model because of performance constraints, right? Databases back in the day just didn't have the computational power to, serve up information for consumers based on the sort of quick access patterns and things like that. Would you like to add anything to that, Zainab?
I guess there are different use cases for data modeling. One is like shaping the data in a way that is understandable by consumers, but also, like as you said, like for performance purposes, like it's like the main thing in data modeling is understanding why you're doing it, for what reason, what you're trying to achieve. Like I always say, like if you're new to data modeling, which I'm very new myself, like I started like a few months ago, it's like always to make sure to start backwards of like, where am I getting to, and like what questions I'm trying to answer and what I'm trying to achieve with my data model. And then from there, like trying to find your access patterns, and then like going through analysis phases and then design at the end, yeah.
Can there be also cost benefits with data modeling? Jonathan, you work at Canva, lots of data at very high scale and things like that. Is data modeling useful in that purpose?
Yeah, I think having a consolidated kind of definition for what data modeling is important to have at any organization. So I guess a story that I will share is that when we started data warehousing at Canva, we didn't have any kind of defined forms of what data modeling meant. And what happened over the years is that we have around 250 contributors who build data models day to day. Around like close to 100 of them are data analysts, and usually they come more from like a R and SQL kind of background, and so not really understanding what Kimball and that sort of practice is. And what we end up having today is around 8,000 DBT models or SQL queries that are running on Snowflake. So it became really expensive if we didn't kind of define what those practices are. And sort of now the homework we're doing is going back and embedding engineers within product teams and saying, hey, let's actually refactor this model. Let's try to do it in a dry approach, reuse existing dimensional tables, fact tables to build those insights.
Yeah, that sprawl that you mentioned about the 8,000 tables in DBT and the like, it's always, is that something that I guess folks are seeing out in the wild in your own companies? Sprawl of data, not sure how well accessed those tables are. Do you have usage metrics, Jonathan, at Canva around, I guess, how frequently some of those tables are being used, and is there some sort of 80-20 rule where sort of 20% of the tables are getting used 80% of the time and the like?
Yeah, I would say we've probably not done a really good job at that area. We've not been tracking metrics of usage. Because there is so many different access points that people can get the data from. So it's not just running a query, it's you have a dashboard connecting to that. And we have 2 different dashboarding tools as well. And we put things like machine learning, experiments, so lots of different ways that the data is being accessed. And we don't actually have full visibility on how much consumption are we having on a dimensional or fact table. But yeah, I would say in general, I would agree. As a rule of thumb, I would say 80% of consumption comes from 20% of tables. A couple of high traffic tables, for example, the DIM user. Everybody needs to know who is a customer. Everybody needs to know how much subscriptions are we having for our service. So those are the kind of high traffic tables that I would say 80% of use cases are built from.
Anything to add from the rest of the panel?
No, just agree with John. We at South32, we sort of encouraged data modeling, but didn't give much guidance. And it wasn't until we've sort of done a first pass or having a consistent guidelines or guardrails from naming standards, are we starting to see some consistency? And I guess have plans in the coming financial year to try to automate as much of that as we can through CI/CD, so there's no need to manually check everything.
Yeah, it sort of touches on, I guess you were touching on the need for data ontology or a semantic layer and things like that. Where do you feel that there's a lot of people focusing a lot on that particular space? Where do you see the effect of that happening in data modeling specifically? Joe, would you like to comment?
I feel like it's, on one hand, I think it's good. On the other hand, what we're failing to do is address the root cause of data issues that we have, which are upstream. Chad talked about this morning, right? Shifting left. And so all we're doing with semantic layer, and it's great, but we're also just bandaging over a lot of the sins that occur upstream, right? Who's seen this?
Hopefully,
right. Yeah. I mean, so at best, all we can do if the data is bad upstream is duct tape it downstream. And so semantic layer, I think it's good in that it consolidates definitions at the analytics layer. I still don't think it's the end all be all, and no offense to the next speaker who will talk about semantic layers. I think they're awesome, and so is the speaker. But at the same time, I feel like we do need to shift left. I'm in violent agreement with what Chad was talking about earlier. I actually feel like the semantic layer should really exist all across the data lifecycle.
Kind of like forcing the producers, probably force is a very strong term, but to provide those definitions around.
Well, because definitions have entropy, and definitions change throughout the life cycle. But the thing is, what I mean by definitions have entropy is when you define something, ultimately the business evolves from that definition at some point, right? So you have to address it upstream, because that's where it changes quickly. So it's things get out of sync. Is my whole point. And so I think it's noble. I mean, who's used Looker before? Lookml. Right? That was the first modern semantic layer. Business objects also had this way back in the day, so it's not new. But I think the implementation of it is, I think, a noble one for headless BI. I think it's awesome. There's many arguments for it, but I still think it fails to address the root cause of why you need it in the first place.
Any other comments around sort of data producers?
It's more of a thought, really. It's do we expect our upstream users to design their backends in a format that we need? Because sometimes I feel they've designed it for a different purpose, which is
well, that's the whole point of
performance.
modeling, right? It's different
Yeah.
models for different use cases.
Yeah.
But the whole point is, I think what we need to understand is data has a life cycle, and data is modeled and evolves throughout the life cycle. And I think us and data and analytics and machine learning, we're in our own bubble, and we're not looking outside. And I think that's part of the problem with this, the whole discussion with modeling right now, is we're recycling the same stuff we've been talking about for the past, since 1996 with Kimball, and then Inman 1989, and then COD is 1970, and so forth, and keep going down. But it's like, what are we doing that's new? We're simply rediscovering fire at this point, right? And so for me, it's like but a lot's happened since then. Like NoSQL databases, right? Different ways of storing data. I guess no normal form is a thing. Machine learning, and all these other streaming, and it's like, what are we doing to catch up with that at this point as an industry? That's what I want to talk about. Is more kind of like what's next. Kimball's been here for ages. We don't need to talk about that anymore. So
It definitely feels like we're sort of going around in circles, coming back to the same problems without sort of really sort of pushing the field. And a lot of it feels like, without sort of throwing it over the fence, but producers, and I think potentially data mesh is trying to help bridge that gap, isn't it, between the consumers and the producers?
Well, because it recognizes that there's a feedback loop with data now, where it goes back into being a product. And so it's not a one-way push anymore, just shifting, data goes downhill to from dev to data, right? It's going back now. And this is here in the crux. Is if we can't recognize the modeling throughout the life cycle, all that's happening is you're sending weird data back to the applications and sending you weird data as well, right? So it's a feedback loop that we need to start thinking of as a continuum versus just, I get my reports and that's it. It's like, that's not what's happening right now. Data is becoming part of systems and applications, the stuff that we traditionally would call like BI and reporting and ML. It's like, it's all flowing. And so.
Zainab, Jonathan, any thoughts on data producers and also data warehousing teams or data engineering teams becoming a data producer themselves, flying it back through?
Sorry. Yeah. That wasn't directed at you. I'm just like.
Yeah, I think like empathizing with you, Ash, on your problem with data producers, and like, I think, especially at Canva, I think people we have such a strong engineering focus, and backend engineers are kind of like the cool kind of people in the company, and so everyone's kind of supporting them, and data is almost like second party in the sense to support product decisions. And so as the warehousing team, we kind of let them change the schema as often as they like at our expense, right? And so they kind of drop columns. We have to then, oh shit, something's dropped. We need to refactor code. And so that's kind of one big pain point, and something like data contracts would at least inform these data producers that they're going to break something downstream that's used by a lot of use cases. But more than that, I think even at the warehousing level, and it's like we shouldn't point fingers, because even at warehouse, I think we're not doing a good job ourselves at keeping the schemas for our downstream users.
You have 5,000? How many models do you have?
8,000 models.
God.
And we have machine learning people that are kind of cursing us and why do you change the schema? And and so I think to Chad's point, I think data contracts are a useful kind of mechanism that can be used anytime there's a producer-consumer relationship.
Can I just give you a quick aside here real quick? Sorry to interrupt, but it's like, so in the podcast I did with Tristan Handy from DBT a few weeks ago, he talked about how they had he had a customer that had 39,000 DBT models, which is kind of nuts. And so they recently announced their pricing change. Is anyone aware of what happened there? Very controversial, by the way. People were pissed. But if I understood what he was doing, though, because he's actually trying to prevent model sprawl by penalizing you for creating, exercising your right to build models. And so it's a way to do it. I can't say it landed well, but I think that's part of the motivation for it. Because it's not like he's dumb. He would, he's not, let's just screw over the customer. So, and they had a point. What were you saying? I thought you were like, yeah, all right.
Yeah, look, I think it makes sense. I mean, I think the model sprawl, because no one can really understand, can conceptualize 8,000 or 39,000 tables in their head, even with the world's best data catalog, I guess. Anything you'd like to add to that, Zainab, in terms of also that feedback loop of now the pricing change and its impact perhaps on model sprawl?
not specifically on DBT pricing the changes, but I think like in one of my clients, we tried different things. One, obviously like the data mesh concept of bringing that data engineering skills into the product, so they will understand the empathy, as Chad was saying, of like the pain points that a data engineer will go through dealing with the data that is getting produced. So that helped a lot. And then also like one other thing was producing like this kind of like centralized data contracts, and then telling like all the product teams that they need to adhere to those kind of like data contracts, and then going back into product development following those data contracts and trying to adhere. I think that's where the complexity comes, that they were like, oh, I don't know, like we're building the product for a different purpose and not necessarily for data engineering purposes. And you kind of like have to balance it as like a middle ground. You can't just like build based on how you want to use your data. Like you've got an application to build as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's a different set of constraints that application developers are building towards, and they're building product, and it's just always seems like a secondary concern. You know, the schema that they're providing and the information that they're providing to consumers, and potentially that there's a need for more tooling around that space. But I'm interested to kind of hear from the audience. We've got 4 awesome panelists here this afternoon, and anyone got any questions, any burning questions at the moment of where the field of data engineering's headed? We've heard of Chad Sanderson's talk this morning on data contracts. Anyone got any questions? I think there's some mics running around the room. Yeah, got one up the back.
I've got a question myself.
Is that allowed?
Not for myself. I think like one of the things that I'm struggling a little bit in the data modeling kind of world is how do you keep the balance of complexity versus accuracy? Like, for example, like we go and build this model, and like when we get to the implementation, especially like building dimensions and fact and dimension tables, it could get very complex, and like when you have like concept like late arriving data and things like that, it gets more complex. And from me, like coming from DevOps background and building like repeatable pattern, things that doesn't fail and you don't get like missing data, like you build resiliency into your engineering, then like trying to make your data engineering transformation resilient, it becomes very complex. So like the question is like, how do you keep the balance of complexity and like modeling your data with like all the good things that we want, making sure we never have inaccurate data, we never miss any data. If pipeline breaks, like things doesn't break it, like it will heal itself, like all that.
Yeah, tell you what, I'm glad I'm not a panelist.
I don't know how to answer that question, to be honest. But, like I've seen some pretty like mega spaghetti store procedures in my time, and most of the time that's already being used a lot, so you don't really have the opportunity to simplify it. But if I do see highly complex code being written, I do ask or encourage the team to ask, like do we need to do this? Like, should we be modeling this complexity and I guess taking other people's problems, like shifting it left back to the product to answer these questions? But I don't think there's an answer for that. I always say to people, like, data modeling is more an art than a science. There's no one answer to answer the business questions, but yeah.
Well, it always evolves too.
Yeah.
Right, so everything, business evolves. We evolve. But yeah, I think you just got to keep answering the question or asking the question, like, what does done look like for this particular case? Like, and done will always change, but done for the purpose of today, right? So you can worry about tomorrow. But, well, because this is how complexity starts, right? Because you want to start doing heroics and anticipate the future. Who can predict the future here?
Yeah, you can spend a lot of time modeling for...
You actually want to be behind in some ways, because that prevents you from doing heroics. I'd rather somebody be behind than trying to be too clever about the future.
Yeah, I don't know whether we answered your question. I don't know whether we can answer you.
She's probably done with data modeling. Actually, this is like the dumbest job I've ever had in my life. I'm like,
I totally think, you've answered in some sense. Like, one of the things that I try to keep in data modeling is like, trying to keep the boundaries of what we're building very clear, as in like you're not trying to answer every question possible or like cater for everything, and just making sure that what are the critical business questions that I'm trying to answer with this data model, and is there a need for it? Are those questions being asked all the time, like often enough to model the data for it? Like if it's a question that you need to get answered like once a month, do I really need to model my data? Like that's how like you keep.
Well, you're still capturing a concept though, right? But I think it's like how key is that concept to your overall workflow? I think is what you're trying to say too.
But like the other complexity that comes with like keeping it resilient and making sure your data is accurate, you're never gonna have like missing data and stuff. I still don't know.
I will ask another question, but we might just jump to this fellow at the back.
What's your favorite super ordinary thing that you've seen or done to improve the data culture at a company that you've been at?
So a question on data culture. What's your favorite thing that's helped?
But what was the adjective that he used? The super what?
Ordinary.
Super ordinary. I think in the US is extraordinary. Is that the same or super ordinary?
I think he means like we didn't implement an LLM, like it's something more trivial than anyone could do. Is that right,
culture?
Paul?
Okay. Simple?
Yeah. I mean, I'll jump in real quick. Documentation. Like, especially in a company that has a lot of contractors coming and going, like keeping that knowledge within the company and for broad consumption was when we started to see like productivity start to get better.
But did that improve the culture or did that improve productivity?
Well, both, because then people started documenting because they're like, they saw value from not having to set up a meeting with someone to answer something trivial or ordinary.
Was that documentation in the form of, say, Confluence or also like a data catalog and stuff like that?
I'd say we're accelerating our documentation of like DBT models right now that lacked before. So you would need to find someone with strong domain knowledge to understand that. But we don't use Confluence, but similar to that,
Some sort of wiki.
Yeah.
I can't think of like heroics that I've done recently, but I can actually, it's something I saw a few weeks ago. I was in Atlanta, Georgia in the US at a company called Chick-fil-A. Who's heard of Chick-fil-A? They make chicken sandwiches. They're really good. I think they put crack in them or something because it's amazing. So I visited, I heard the culture was amazing, right? And so my friends in the data team asked me to go there and do it, asked me anything over lunch. I ate like 10 chicken sandwiches that day, which is amazing. But this is where it got interesting, right? So you talk about culture and super ordinary things. So Chick-fil-A's culture is very, very interesting. Everyone knows why they're there, right? It is by far the best culture I've ever seen at a company. Whether or not you agree with like the details of what they do, you can go look it up. It doesn't matter. But everyone to the T I met there, I thought it was a ruse at first. I thought there was like a show they're putting on. Like, when you go to Chick-fil-A, if you've ever been to one, they always say, "Oh, my pleasure." When you ask them, you say, "Thank you." And like, "Oh," like this is weird. Employees, like people on the data team were doing that. They took my my tray away and they're like, and I said, "Thank you." And like, "Oh, it's my pleasure to do this." And I was like, what is this place? So Chick-fil-A is by far the highest grossing, or the highest revenue, highest grossing, and most profitable fast food restaurant in the United States by a long shot. They don't have that many locations either. Everyone there kills. Like, they're awesome. And I'm killing the best way, not that way. Sorry. Jet lag. But no, I think it's just an example of like a high-performing culture where, the founder set the tone of the things, of the values that the company, wanted, right? And so it's family-oriented. You know why you're there. It's a faith-based organization too. But it works. I've never seen anything quite like this. Everyone, like I said, everyone knows why they're there, what their purpose is. They go home at 5, right? It's just a perfect balance of like reasons and like just work-life balance. So.
Yeah, awesome. That's super inspiring. I think there's actually a video on Ritz-Carlton about like this teddy bear or something like that. People should look it up.
the story that you were telling reminded me about a great Ritz-Carlton customer service experience and just ingraining that sense of customer service into the culture, which I think sort of can be quite a powerful thing to just see even across like data teams. Are you seeing?
Well, let's go test it right now. I mean, we're here.
Are you seeing similar things, Zainab and Jonathan, in terms of culture? What are some of the similar, I guess, the simple things that you're seeing that, from a cultural perspective, that make fantastic data engineering teams?
Yeah, I can go. I guess for me it would be, I think 6 years ago when I first started my first role in data, I worked in a place where it was like BI was the term that was used, and it was in data engineering, and so SQL code was, I think Saraf in the back, hello. We used to work at the same place, and so he would know all about it as well. SQL code stored in OneDrive, that's our version control system back in the day, right? Pretty cool. Or sometimes we would just save the stored procedure on the SQL server, and that's version control, or saved, productionized. I guess the thing that changed the culture was when we started using Git in that particular team. And as soon as we started using Git, all of a sudden, like, we started bringing in all these software engineering practices into the way we do data. And for example, now we would like have discussions around code review, pull requests, like someone's checking out each other's code. We didn't used to have that before, and like something simple like Git actually enabled us to have those types of discussions.
Awesome. Got a question from Mark at the back.
So we've already proven that in Australia we like to do things upside down, and we've got panelists asking questions. I've got a simple thing to share which answers the question of my esteemed audience member. Two simple things. One, find someone senior to say amazing things about data. That's get it on an internet page or a video is number one. The second is, if you're building dashboards, turn the title of the dashboard into a question that then the dashboard answers. Those two things have had a bigger lever, a simple lever on data culture in companies that I worked in.
Nice.
Like, are we bankrupt?
$1 profit.
Yeah.
With an exclamation mark after the question mark.
Question up the front.
Your mic's up. That's on purpose. I'm just kidding.
Sorry for that. A question for Joe. I think with the new AI, OpenAI, Copilot, and everyone, I think how do we see in the future the data platform teams for the enterprise would add a value?
I mean, it's an interesting question. I think that on the supply side, right, I think that we'll be tasked with providing different types of data, a lot of unstructured data. So it's funny, we think in terms of rows and columns right now, or maybe JSON objects, right? But that's like, if you look at the vast amount of data in a company, it's actually pretty minuscule, right? So it's interesting too. Bill Inman's a really good friend of mine. Who knows who he is? He's the guy who created the data warehouse and stuff. But after he created the data warehouse, he kind of like left it aside. He's like, this is cool, but he realized early on that text data was actually the big one. Like 80% of your corporate data is text. Call center logs, emails, all this other stuff, right? So why are we focused on this rows and columns? It's like, I don't know, we have techniques that already solved that for decades, so like, why are we fixated on that? So I think to your point, I think it's the unstructured data use cases I think that are the most exciting, and I think that's going to open up a whole new sea of possibilities, so to speak. Now, in terms of what would AI do to enable such things, I think there's the other side of the question, the demand side perhaps, and I'm getting too flipped around, but whatever. I think it remains to be seen. Part of it is really whether or not we're in the ascendancy of AI, or whether we're not just in another giant hype bubble with AI. I don't know the answer to this yet. And apologies to any AI vendors out there.
Do you feel like we're about to be replaced by an LLM as data platform teams and data engineers, Ash?
I don't. I think we're about to figure out how to use it more. How can we like bake it into our existing process? Like OneWeb, like researching in our team is how can we change the process in change management? Like, do we need to teach people 50-page documents anymore? Like, probably not. We can focus on teaching them the concepts, and then they can figure out the syntax by asking it. I think that's going to be a big change in the coming months or years.
Yeah, perhaps even an LLM-driven data catalog or something like that. I guess you know, there's companies, ThoughtSpot and the like.
You can see them popping up on LinkedIn. But
it depends how good the data is. I mean, that's back to the data modeling discussion, though, right? I feel like there's a lot of attention on data right now, an unusual amount. And I find like this is the time as an industry when we have the perfect opportunity to get it right. All the stuff we've been talking about for ages, governance, data management, quality, cataloging, whatever other things you want to talk about. But it's like, for the past few decades, we've been like trying to, regurgitating a lot of these same themes. And I was getting, as you point out, it's kind of like Groundhog Day, right? But like, if we're going to get this stuff right, wouldn't you think this is the time to do it? How are you going to throw a large language? Would anyone throw a large language model on top of your corporate data set right now?
No.
Who would do that? I'll give you $100 if you can say yeah, and you can prove it, of course. You do it? Okay, fine. We'll pull out your laptop and we'll do it, right? But my whole point is, this is a time when we can get these basics, the stuff we're talking about, as a panel and as an audience, right? If we can't get it right now, like when are we going to do it?
Zainab?
I agree. No, it's not going to change our jobs. I mean, like, get rid of our jobs, but like, I think incorporate and get more into our day-to-day kind of like processes. It's where we're going to be headed at. Like, I can see a lot of application developments. They're thinking how to like bring AI into their application development and what advantages and things that they're getting they can get from it. And in the data perspective as well, like we're producing a lot of data as well ourselves. Like we're data engineers and like we're generating data and transforming it, whatever. But we're also producing a lot of data. There's a lot of metadata that we can get insights from, and like we can get advantage to help our data engineering. Like for example, like metadata about like queries and things that are running often, or like metadata about like things that we need to focus on, critical, business critical, like tables. Like there's so many metadata that we can take advantage and like use it to help our data engineering process a bit better and to be in-house more. So, yeah.
Very cool, very cool. I know Canva has got a lot of AI in its product already. Interesting to see if it's using much in its data teams, but maybe we'll have to ask that question of Jonathan individually at drinks or something like that at the after party. But just quickly, I know there's probably a few people in the room that are perhaps new to data engineering. You're not quite a data engineer. Are there sort of non-data engineers? I don't want to. It's okay if you don't want to put your hands up. But what would be your just like a quick sort of one-liner advice on getting into the field and getting started? Is it a worthwhile pursuit? Sounds like LLMs are not going to replace us immediately. So, Jonathan, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, I guess the biggest takeaway from me, just observing how data engineering has evolved, we kind of went from a kind of vendor enterprisey type approach, and we're using a lot of tools like Informatica, Oracle. And then we're heading more towards like software engineering type practices. So if I were to kind of give one advice, it would be just like embrace software engineering and learn that skill, because that's, I guess, the fundamentals towards a lot of the kind of practices that you're seeing being discussed today, like data contracts and so on, and data quality tests. And these things are already implemented in the software engineering world, and so we're just translating that across into data.
Awesome. Well, with that, I think we might thank our panelists, because I've gone 1 minute over, so I've been a very bad moderator. So anyway, thank you very much, Jonathan Neo, Zainab Maleki, Ashmit, and Joe Reis. Awesome.